and welcome to the M-Word CIC. My name is Lavinia Dowling and I am director and founder. We support young people and adults who are neurodiverse, who are struggling with their mental health. Now, I've got a really lovely lady. You're going to want to hear this gossip because this is good. This is meaty, very juicy, but this is an interesting petition that is struck a chord with me. I want to introduce you to Catherine Harvey, who has put a petition. I'm not going to spoil the gossip because it's Catherine's gossip. So take it away, Catherine. Tell me all about this petition that had me scurrying to email you going, whoop, I want to help you with this. Tell us what it is.
So basically, I've created this petition to ask the UK government to authorise up to 5 days authorised absence for children struggling with their mental health, particularly those who have autism, ADHD, stuff with EBSA, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I've set it up because I really struggled myself in school. I was that child. I couldn't cope. I ended up being absent for around 3 years.
Wow.
It was really tough. Nobody could figure out, what was wrong with me, if you like.
Yes.
So I really struggled. But then I now have 2 children who are on the pathway for autism. One's a teenager, so it's all that kind of teenage emotions that are going on, and I've actually given her some mental health days because I thought, why should she have to push through when she really can't, So I said, no, you can take the day. So it's just to support my own children. But then I have also worked in pupil referral units across Liverpool and Sefton. So I've worked with lots of young people who really struggle with their mental health, and lots of young people with autism and ADHD and things, and it's just about the effects that has on them, but not only on them, on their families as well. The immense pressure that is put on, young people to get into school no matter what the cost. And, it's all about, moments matter, attendance counts. And it's like, yeah, attendance does count, but mental health matters more. And it's the pressure that's on their families as well. You've got parents who are getting fines, who are getting so much pressure from schools and local authorities to get their children into school, when actually all they're doing is trying to, protect their wellbeing and to look after them and make them, better mentally and emotionally, and not push them to doing something that they don't feel able to do. So it's just about, showing young people and their families that we care about how they are feeling and how they are, and not just about if they're in the building, in the school building. So that's why I've set it up.
And so your experience, your direct experience for you, where you've identified 3 years, you're presumably trying to make sure that this doesn't happen again and again and again. What I find interesting is that although we have these mantras like attendance matters, what I really struggle with is how young people cannot learn when they are so anxious that it's impacting their sleep, their appetite, their interactions with others. And the thing that really, I would love to have a meeting with Dame D'Souza, because the frustration I have is 2 years ago, she insisted we're going to have 100% attendance on the first day back of September. And I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense, because if this is all about attendance, you're missing a really vital piece of information, or you're just bloody minded and don't care. But also my frustration is about why on earth are there not 2 departments talking to one another, i.e. education and health, going, why have we got such a high suicide rate? And why have we got anxiety as the biggest barrier to education? Why are we still enforcing that people have to go to school when actually there is something around the anxiety that's stopping them from attend? Your evidence of it. But then Dame D'Souza, Radio 4, had that big interview last year. I don't know if you were aware of it. And they had this discussion around where Dame D'Souza was actually invited and did speak. But there was a young person there who really had the courage to speak out about how she'd been terribly let down by the educational system. And yet here we are, you and I, having a discussion, and I'm thinking, there are lots and lots of journals, there are lots and lots of books, there are lots and lots of Facebook groups of really concerned parents. There are so many people talking about anxiety being a barrier, and yet Dame D'Souza is still pushing for attendance. And when you think about schools, the mantras are very often, if you don't come to school, you won't learn. If you don't come to school and you can't learn, then you're just not going to progress. But all the while, not one person within education says, actually, if we keep pushing and these young people's anxiety builds, then effectively we'll be signing them with a lifetime of poor mental health. And nobody wants to talk about that, do they?
No, and I think that's, you know, for me, you know, this was a very, you know, long running problem for me. You know, I started suffering with anxiety when I was in primary school, you know, and I would go in and you know, and they would say, you know, we can't teach you if you're not here. And yeah, that's true. But you also can't teach children that are there but are not engaged and who are suffering from, you know, immense anxiety, and you can't even get into a classroom. You know, you've got children who are being sent to pupil referral units because of attendance. I got sent to a pupil referral unit myself because of my lack of attendance. So I was out of school in year 7, 8 and 9, and then in year 10 I got sent to a pupil referral unit because they were like, she's bringing our attendance figures down, you know, we're not meeting our targets for attendance, so send her somewhere else, basically.
Yeah.
And that was what happened. You know, I was sent there for attendance, and actually it was an unmet need, you know, and it was very much kind of, we can't figure out what's wrong with her, you know, and I masked incredibly well. You know, I always very much knew what to say to, you know, what people wanted to hear, that kind of thing. You know, and they would just be like, we don't know what's wrong with you. We don't know what's wrong with you. And I was saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. Do you think I don't want to be in school? Do you think I don't want to be with people my own age and, you know, going out and having friendships and things like that? Of course, that's what I wanted. But that barrier, it wouldn't allow me to do those things. And it was horrible. You know, if anybody did see me, if any, you know, the people in my year would see me, they'd say, why are you never in school? What's going on with you? Or, you know, and it was that kind of stigma of, oh, there's something going on with her, you're like, why she's not in school and things like that. And it was really hard then. So that kind of just built up over time, and eventually that's when it became the 3-year gap of not being in school. And I just think, you know, I was let down by the education system like immensely, you know, really. And I think now as I'm older, I really struggle with that. And I think if we'd have known maybe sooner that I had ADHD, I'm also on the pathway for autism as well. If we'd have known sooner, how much easier would my life have been, how much easier things have been, you know, and it's things like that. And like for my daughter, she masks, she is like, you know, on the surface, great, everything's fine, everything's amazing, everything's brilliant. She's in year 9. And she's just started to, you know, really, really struggle with things in school. I've had no idea. They've not put anything in place for her whatsoever. You know, she's tried to access support, and, you know, she actually said to one of her student support about, you know, when I get angry, I can't hear. And they said, well, don't get angry then. And that was it. There was no kind of like support that was given to her or anything. You know, they just kind of, you know, she's no problem. She masks. She just gets on with it. But actually, because I got in touch with them and I said, no, it's not in her best interest to come in today. You know, she's really, really struggling with her wellbeing. I'm going to keep her at home. That's kind of signposted her to them to kind of say, oh, we didn't realise there was any issues. We thought she was great. We thought she was fine. So it's signposting the young people that maybe appear fine in school, but are actually really struggling, you know, and then putting things in place. It's all about early intervention, isn't it? It's about, okay, how can we do this now? How can we, you know, make this better now so it doesn't escalate? So they're not, you know, out of school like I was for 3 years, you know, and it's all about the early interventions, isn't it, really, to kind of to support their well-being.
Yeah. And I also really find it very frustrating. It's interesting how you've managed to say that you've made contact with the school to signpost them. But we are a really small niche service. I'm a mental health nurse, but I specialise in neurodiversity. And I left CAMHS because there was nothing out there for neurodiverse young people. And parents were just watching their children deteriorate so quickly and swiftly. And it's frightening when you've got a child who's, you know, you love very much, and you see them just deteriorating, but nobody is supporting them. And we have this service where in most cases parents come to us because there is nowhere else, and by that time they're so worried about what might happen that they kind of say, I've got to do something desperately. But that's frustrating because you've identified preventative care. I'm very much about, I could have easily said, you know what, I know there's an issue, but I'm not going to set up the M word. But I was so angry because, like you, I've been failed. My child had been failed until I stepped in. And you just know that there are so many young people who are being failed or dismissed. We've got crazy numbers who are youth offenders. They too have been missed. So there is a much bigger problem that people at government level are just, well, it's ironic, isn't it? They say that children and teenagers choose to behave in this way. Well, the government chooses to ignore what you and I are trying to do in being preventative. And the thing that really is incredible is that I've been a nurse for nearly 30 years, and I have talked throughout my entire 30-year career of we've got to be proactive and we've got to be preventative, because the impact then will be considerably lower, the risks will be considerably lower, and guess what? The cost will be considerably lower.
And that's the thing, is that that's what they care about the most, is the cost, isn't it? It's all about money with them, and it's all about, funding for things, and and that's a lot of the time why waiting lists are so long. You say to a school or professional, my child's really, really struggling, and they say, okay, we'll put you on a waiting list. And they're on that waiting list for over a year, and you're thinking, that's, all those things that could happen in a year. How many young people are on waiting lists when they commit suicide? How many young people are on waiting lists when it's just so wrong, and they're just not getting that support that they need? So I feel like it is that kind of thing. It's just signposting them to schools and to professionals about, actually they've taken, maybe 3 mental health days this term. What's going on right now? And I'm not saying that, it's not about avoiding education. It really isn't, because obviously education is really, really important. But they can't access their education unless they're regulated, and unless they're, in a good place, mentally. And you think, I would keep my child off if they, if they had a stomach bug, or if they had flu or things like that. And why aren't we allowed to keep our children off when they're really not in a good place? I think about going to work and things. A lot of people in workplaces, they if they wake up in the morning, they say, I just can't today. I just can't. I haven't got it in me today. They can take annual leave for that day. A lot of the time, not always, but they can, they can say, I'm going to take annual leave for a couple of days. But with our children, if they wake up in the morning and they just say, I just can't today, you're expecting them to push through. And especially for children, neurodiverse children who struggle so much with their emotional regulation and those things anyway, it's almost impossible, isn't it? It's almost impossible to just push through, and that's what I always found. Do you think this is a choice? Do you think I want to be like this? Do you think I want to be out of school and feel, these anxieties and stuff? But it wasn't a choice. It was an unmet need that if people had kind of supported me earlier and maybe understood things earlier, then it wouldn't have happened. And I was very, very lucky. I had a mum who was amazing. She begged for support, please, just anything you can do to help her, anything that you can do. And it was just she was always met with, we don't know what's wrong with her. We don't know what's wrong with her. And it was that frustration, kind of, particularly with girls. I think with boys, you not always, but you tend to kind of see the signs a little bit more with boys, don't you? Like, I've got a son who he's only 4, but he's the bouncing off the wall kind of child, can't sit still, loud. Whereas my daughter is the complete opposite. She's the people pleaser. She's the, wants to make everybody happy, wants to do the right thing, wants to follow the rules. And that's why she's gone missed, and that's what I find working in pupil referral units is, you'll have young people coming in and they're in year 10, and you think, how has nobody put support in place for you? Why are you being excluded from a school when, it is an unmet need, and it is, you know, anxiety, and it, you know, you've got to think about the backgrounds of things, you know, and their parents. They might not have the best experience with education and things, so it's changing that kind of mindset of, you know, school is just to learn. Yes, it
Yeah.
is to learn, but it's also that support, isn't it? And to have that kind of, you know, the whole package of, yes, you're learning academically, but you're also learning how to look after yourself emotionally and mentally as well. I think that's what needs to be taught more in schools as well.
Yeah. And there are some autistic young people that I have met who don't bother with niceties and just say it how it is. Schools should be set on fire. Head teachers should be shot for the way they treat young people. But also, there is a rather increasing trend where they say, I don't need to go to school to learn compliance, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Or I don't need to go to school to have my identity beaten out of me.
Yeah.
That is very interesting because you think, well, okay, you're thinking about the bigger picture. And when you think about learning, i.e., learning about anything, learning can be done anywhere. And if it is about you've got to get your English, you've got to get your maths, you've got to get your science, why do we need to keep drilling this in when, in actual fact, a motivated, well-being person will find ways to learn because they're naturally curious, but an unwell person is not going to have any motivation, inclination, interest, full stop, to do any of that because they are just so unwell. And there just is, it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I could talk about that till the cows come home.
Yeah. Yeah, forever.
Tell us how you decided on doing a petition. I mean, this is seriously big. This is not your run-of-the-mill situation scenarios, is it? I mean, so how did that come about?
I think so. I was just, I've obviously I've worked in schools for a long time, and I've always, you know, I've seen and I've heard senior leaders say things like, you know, unless you need hospital treatment, you should be in school. And that was something that I was like, what? That is crazy.
Yeah.
You know, so it's something that I've kind of wanted to do for a while, but I've not really had the confidence to do it. And I've always thought, you know, oh no, why would anybody be interested in what I've got to say? Or why would anybody think that, you know, that it was important or something? And then one day I was thinking about my daughter, and I was thinking about my, you know, I've got nieces and nephews and things. I was thinking about my own family and thought, you know, how much could this help them? You know, how could they benefit from these, you know, of days where they just say, today I just can't. So I just thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to set it up. And I went online and created a petition. And I just did it. I just thought, why not? You know, because if people want to listen, then great, and if they don't, then, you know, I've got to think about how we can make them listen.
So how did you even know where to go to set up a petition? I mean, this is what I'm saying. It's just one of those
Yeah,
things you just don't think about, isn't it?
yeah. Well, I think so. I've obviously like online and things like that. You know, I follow quite a lot of, you know, mental health
Ah,
charities, quite a lot of, you know, autism charities and things like that, and, you know, people who are really really passionate about, you know, mental health and you know, the needs of neurodiverse children, things like that. So I follow quite a lot of those. So I just see them and think, I'm going to do that. You know, if they've done it, why can't I do it? You know,
yeah.
that was just what it was. I thought, well, they have, so I'll try it as well. And then obviously, you know, setting it up and then sending it out to people, you know, messaging people on you know, Facebook, Instagram, sending emails, you know, researching, you know, local mental health charities, national mental health
Yeah.
charities, researching them and just putting, which is quite difficult for me to put myself out there. It's, you know, I've always thought, nobody's going to care, nobody's going to care. But I thought, well, no, actually, this is something I care about, you
Yeah.
know, and if I care about it this much, there's got to be other parents that
Yeah.
also care about it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of like emailing the petition to people, sending messages on social media and things, just trying to get that, you know, word out there of, no, this is important, you know, this is protecting our children's mental health and well-being now, but also for the future as well.
So one of the things I want to share with you is I have been to certain shows. So I've been to the TES show and I've been to other places where head teachers will get together and they will have what looks like a jolly. They say it isn't a jolly.
Oh, it is.
But it clearly is, because all the exhibitors, so I'm thinking of one that I attended in Cornwall, there were 15 exhibitors. We all had to pay several hundreds of pounds to be there. And the idea being that our stands were in the same room that they were having their speakers come in, and we were at the back and the sides. But what we found was there was, on this particular day, there were 3 different speakers. All of them touched on mental health. And we were the only mental health charity in the room.
Wow.
We were even asked to give gifts for sort of like a tombola. There was no money exchanged. They didn't want chocolates. They didn't want wine. What they wanted was something from your stall. So we presented 2 research journals and a wellbeing journal. And I could see that the teachers were investigating, who were running the day, they were investigating, and clearly there was a lengthy conversation going on. And then in the end, somebody came up and said, sorry, what do you do? As if it was almost like, we don't want anything like that going in as a gift. But it was really quite shocking, because in the break times and lunchtime, we had maybe 5 people come up to us. Not one of them was a head teacher. It was either a Senko or a teaching assistant who had literally dropped in. And you're just like, I don't understand. You all are doing this. And then at the end, I wish I hadn't heard this, but I did. We had 2 staff members talk about, oh, we're back here in 2 weeks. Do you fancy Greek food or pizza?
Oh, that's just that.
So this is what's important. There was a sign person next to us, and there was a head teacher who rushed over, and these signs weren't cheap, you know, for the entrance to put their surname on it. So this head teacher was very keen to have her name displayed everywhere. £4,000. She was very happy to fork out £4,000 for signage, but did not want to come and speak to us. And at the test show, the volume of head teachers and deputy head teachers who just looked, saw what we did and rushed on by. And another person who I've engaged with quite a few times said, you know, it really is quite shocking how schools up and down the country will entertain Mental Health Awareness Day, but only that day.
That day, and you know, and I find it's very much
just that day.
Yeah, and a lot of it is a tick box. So that if somebody comes in and says, well, what are you doing to support, you know, student mental health? You say, oh, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And you say, well, are you? Are you actually? Or is this just something that is on your website and looks very nice? Are you actually putting it into practice day to day? Or is this just something that you're, you know, ticking that box that, oh, yes, we support student wellbeing and mental health and things. And, you know, a lot for head teachers. And I'm not saying this is for all head teachers, because when I went to the pupil referral unit, the head teacher that was there was fantastic. She was amazing, and she really did genuinely care. But I feel like now everything's all about, you know, attendance numbers. Everything's all about targets. Everything's all about, you know, how you almost. I think as well, because a lot of schools are becoming academies. It's all about the brand, isn't it? You know, they're becoming a business. You know, so we've got, you know, our attendance is this, and, you know, our exam results are this, and all that kind of thing. It's all about a brand, and it's all about, you know, look how great we are because we've had, you know, 100% of the students have been in this mountain. And you think, well, actually, yeah, but those students that are coming in, how are they actually feeling themselves? Are they in because they feel able to? Or are they in and is it causing them so much stress and so much anxiety? But they're just kind of powering through because that's what's drilled into them. You know, you've got to be here, you've got to be here, you've got to be here. You know, you have to be in school. And as a professional working in schools as well, it's very much drilled into you of attendance is everybody's responsibility. You need to be telling them, you need to be coming in, you need to be questioning them. If they went in yesterday, you need to be asking them, where were you? Why weren't you in? What was going on? You know, but not necessarily in a supportive kind of way, and more of a kind of, you know, well, what were you doing that you weren't here? Were you sitting home on your PlayStation, or
Yeah.
were you in bed? And, you know, could you just not be bothered getting up? And you know, this petition for me, it's not about kids who can't be bothered. It's not about, oh, I can't bother going into school today, or I'm tired, I stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning on you know, my game or whatever. It's not about that. It's about the young people who can't sleep till 4 o'clock in the morning because they're so anxious about going into school the next day, you know. And
Yeah.
it is about putting those, I think, for as regards to schools as well, this petition would help the schools, because, you know, they are under a lot of pressure for, you know,
Yeah.
attendance and meeting those targets.
Yeah.
Whereas this would kind of, you know, if those attendances, if the absence was authorised, then it would be like, okay, well, they've got those authorised absences, so we're not under so much kind of pressure to be, you know, ringing them, where are you, where are you, where are you, going on, you know, visits to the house, where are you, you know, those kind of things. So
Yeah.
it would be a benefit for schools as well, you know, and that's what a lot of senior leaders want. It's, how is this going to benefit us as a school, you know? And it is sad. It's such a shame. You know, you do get a lot of amazing staff in schools who do genuinely want to help the children, but then you do get the others who are just, you know, no, you're here to learn, get in, no matter what the cost. And it's heartbreaking. It really is.
So there's a couple of things in that for me, because whilst we're so busy drilling this mantra in of 100% attendance, you know, you've got to question and challenge why you're not in. But actually, if we're too busy fulfilling the mantra, we're not really thinking about anybody's mental health, because it's going to be quite stressful for both staff and parents and young people, with this constant gripe that you must be in no matter what the cost. And, you know, you said earlier, you know, about the teacher saying, you know, you're not in hospital, so you need to be here. But also, when we are forcing young people to go into school, we're not actually validating them. We've removed their voice completely by saying, it doesn't matter how unwell you are, you have to come in. And yet, there is a real flip side story for this about staff, because if we were to say, I don't care how unwell you are, you have got to get your ass in onto a chair, we would have we would have union reps up in arms. And actually, we don't dictate that a person can take no staff leave. We don't dictate that at all. We say, you know, if you're not well, don't come in. You just need to obviously go and see a GP after so many days. And yet young people don't even get a sniff of being able to say that. At best, you could say you've vomited or diarrhea, but that's it, isn't it? And it just seems very unfair and very much in PDA language, so pathological demand avoidance. Do as I say, not what I do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That doesn't seem right, and it certainly doesn't sit very comfortably with me, because again, if you were to go and ask all those young people who've been forced into school and feel, particularly those who mask or fawn, how's your mental health doing? We know how it's doing by the end, because they're in pieces, and they usually need to take time out, like a gap year, before they go on to university, or they usually fall apart in university because they cannot cope with the, you know, the offset of everything that they've gone through, or they resort to other things like unsafe behavior, whether it's drugs, whether it's crime, whether it's alcohol, or whether it's, you know, doing any form of misdemeanor to themselves or to others. So I think what really is incredibly blinkered is that education staff only focus on the there and then, get them into school, without giving credit to the fact that their impact could have a mammoth impact on a young person's life for the rest of their life.
Yeah,
You know, and that's what really is not ethical for me, because no child, no young person would sign themselves up, give me a lifetime of misery. Nobody would.
No.
In the same way that if you ask anybody, would you, as an adult, would you like to go back to school? No chance. No thanks. I'm off.
Yeah.
There's something around education that we're really not getting right, that doesn't consider young people having the same rights as adults when it comes to their mental health and well-being, and there is something seriously wrong with that.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? You know, you go
On
to,
the parents.
yeah, it is. It's that pressure on the parents. You know, if you're unwell, if you're struggling with your mental health and you're in work, you can go to your doctor and you can get a fit note to sign you off for a month. And that month might be what it takes for you to kind of reset and rest and get well, and then you go back to work. And there's no consequence to that at all. Everybody's, oh, great to see you, and all that kind of, hope you're okay. What can I do to kind of support you and things like that. But for young people, if they're off school for a month, you've got, attendance officers at the door. You've got, the authority. Well, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And they're almost saying to parents, well, what are you doing to get them in? And why aren't you doing this? And why aren't... And then it creates that kind of animosity then between the school and the parents as well, because the parents are saying, I'm trying to look after my child's well-being. Yes, but they have to be in school. Yes, but they also have to be mentally well.
Yeah.
And it creates that kind of, and a lot of parents are getting blamed for their children not being in school when, they're just trying to look after them. And obviously in school, the parents see the mornings of, the tears or, the meltdowns, the shutdowns, the parents see that. The schools don't see that. Sometimes they might do. Sometimes, you might have some staff in school that do see those kinds of behaviours, but it's the parents that, will be sitting up with them at, 2 o'clock in the morning with them crying. Because that's what it was like for me. It was my mum that was sitting with me at all hours of the night and the morning, of me just saying, why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just get in? What's wrong with me? And, so it's the parents that are seeing that. And, it's not the staff that are seeing the children in those, dysregulated, distressed states. So of course the parents, no parent wants to see the child go through that. No parent wants the children to feel, so unhappy. So it is that kind of, well, we need to not be blaming the parents for things. We need to not be blaming the parents for supporting their children's emotional well-being, and start actually looking at, okay, well, maybe they do just need a little bit of time. Maybe they do just need, a few days here and there to have that reset. And, it might be a case of, they might just need to sit in bed and, watch their favourite show on Netflix and eat junk food, and then they go, I feel a bit better. It's like when you get a cold, isn't it? And you stay off for the cold. One day you might feel awful, but the next day you get up and you go, oh, I feel loads better. I needed that day. And it's the same with mental health, isn't it? They might just need that day to go for a walk, or, particularly for children who may be getting bullied as well. There's no escape from that. You've got it all the time in school. You have it on your phone, over Snapchat, social media. There's no escape from it. But a lot of the time, if maybe they take that mental health day and they take that time, and the other children are maybe in school, they haven't got somebody messaging them all the time. They haven't got somebody saying things to them, and it could give them that time to maybe talk to the parents or talk to somebody and say, actually, I needed this day because this was happening and because this was going on and this was why I took it.
So that's quite interesting as well, because there are some young people who are neurodiverse. And particularly for me as a nurse, when I've come in, the parents are saying, I know they've been bullied, I know things have happened, I just don't know exactly what. And through the therapy, a young person will disclose a volume of things that have happened over time. And it can sometimes be 5-6 years down the lane, which is really frightening, because they've been sitting with that for a long time. And the other thing is as well, is that our data tells us that of all our clients, 91%, so that's 91%, have both autism and ADHD. And for anybody who's really familiar with that, they'll understand that autism needs time to process, whereas ADHD needs movement to process. And of course, schools are very much about sit still, look at me, listen to me, get on with your work. And then they will ask lots of questions about for teachers to ensure that their learners have learnt what they've been teaching. So if you have autism and PDA, autism and ADHD and PDA, you're going to fall a cropper with that, because it's a demand. And of course, you're going to be already very heightened with your anxiety. It's only going to get worse. But then the thing that really comes back to me is, I am a mental health nurse. I have a duty of care for all my clients, as well as my parents who come in with me. But the schools also have a duty of care. And yet, with one fell swoop, they then turn around and displace the blame onto the parents, going, you're the reason making home too comfortable, you're being too sensitive, too emotional, when in actual fact, of course, it's nothing to do with them. I mean, how can school be frightening? We're lovely here. No, but actually the environment is so awful for some people. And when you've got the anxiety as the biggest barrier, and there's a document that Ellie, my colleague, and I have referred to several times over that came out 2 years ago, and then they did another one last year. It was very much identifying if anxiety is the biggest barrier, why are you choosing to ignore that? Because clearly you're displacing the blame and eroding any form of, well, of course it might be us. There needs to be a real partnership, doesn't there? But anyway, again, I could talk for a bit on that. You were going to say?
Yeah, so I think for a lot of young people with ADHD and autism, like myself, having ADHD, being on the pathway for autism, I've always said, I feel like I've got two people in my head and they're constantly at war with themselves. I'm more of a rational person who's, very much kind of like, well, you really need to think about this. And I've got the other person who is always like, no, just, it's, and it's that kind of, so it's a battle all the time, and I think, a lot of people with autism and ADHD and PDA and things, they're constantly in a battle with themselves. They're constantly battling their own minds. So to go into school and to constantly having to be battling things in school, it's just so overwhelming. It's draining. It's exhausting, when you go into school and, schools are just not made for autistic and ADHD people, are they? They're just not, the bright lights, the amount of people, noises, the way everything echoes, and, they're just not fit for purpose, fit for autism and ADHD children. And I think that is that kind of, what kind of things can they put in place, and yes, they might have, SEN bases and things like that, which a lot of schools is, you need a diagnosis to go to those. You can't just access those, and which is terrible in itself. And yes, they might put, student support in, and yes, they might put the things in place, but they're not, a lot of them, they don't get it. They don't get, actually, no, this is just coming through the door today is a massive, massive deal for these people, and if I always used to think for them going in, the ones that have really struggled on attendance, they'd want them in straight away. It was like, okay, you've been off for 2 weeks, but you're on a full day tomorrow. Like that's just so overwhelming. That's just too much, isn't it? So it's, kind of, well, start off, because if you're off work, you go back on a phased return, don't you? And those kind of things. So it's that.
Here we are again, two different levels.
Yeah, why are we kind of saying that that's okay for adults, but not saying that that's okay for children? Children who are, that they're not emotionally, developed enough. They're not kind of as aware of their emotions and things like that, and they're not able to. A lot of the time, they're not able to use their own voice and to kind of stand up for themselves. That they're told everything. They're told what to wear to go to school. They're told how to have the hair for school. They're told, what time you eat, what time. They're told everything. And a lot of children, with PDA, those demands are just too much. It's, I can't cope, and that's what, like, we have that with my son quite a lot. He's, definitely got a PDA profile, and everything has to be a choice. Even down to things like, okay, well, what shoes are you putting on today? You're putting those ones on or those ones on, because it's giving them that choice, and it's giving them that kind of, so they feel like they're able to make that choice for themselves. And I think that's, with this petition, it is that kind of, they can make that decision. Obviously, we'll be monitored by parents and things like that, but they can make that decision of, no, today I'm not well enough to go into school. And we need to be listening to that, don't we? We need to be listening to, I'm not well enough to go into school.
And I think the other thing as well is parents don't normally kick up a fuss when there is things that are okay. They kick up a fuss when they can see something is really alarming. And what really is interesting is, if something was happening at home and the child was protesting, don't send me home, don't send me home, what would schools do? They would be straight round to social services saying there's a safeguarding concern here. But for some reason, parents are deemed as almost liars. You're making all this up. You're making home far too comfortable. And it really is. There is no equality for those who have identified learning needs. And I also just want to add that, you know, there is no law in the land that stipulates you must go and get a formal diagnosis. It's more about finding a professional who can identify the needs. And part of that is because, one, we don't have enough resources or skilled people like me who can come along and do the identification of needs around autism, ADHD, PDA, and anxiety and low mood and suicidal ideation and self-harm. I mean, one of a very small number who can do all of that. But then you would think that if there isn't enough people, that government should be able to say to schools, you're going to have to allow for private reports who probably would do a better job. But then, of course, it's all about ring fencing money, and that's a whole different topic. But it's all kind of interrelated, isn't it? We're just not doing enough. And therefore, neurodiverse people are getting the best of a worse deal.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, the school system is it's for particularly for children, you know, neurodiverse children, it's so broken for them, you know, and it really, really is sad, you know, because I just feel like they've got enough to battle with themselves, you know, they've got enough to kind of have to deal with, you know, all young people have, not just neurodiverse children, you know, all young people have got a lot to deal with nowadays, you know, with like, you know, social media and all those kind of things. But particularly for, you know, neurodiverse children, they've got so much that they have to, you know, to manage. And, you know, even like I always used to say things like, if they get the bus to school and, you know, there's a diversion, that could set their day off, and it could be, oh my God, you know, I can't, you know, and it's just kind of, it's not seen, it's not kind of, it's just not fit for purpose for them, is it? You know, and something needs to change to make it more accessible for children who are struggling, you know, with their mental health, and also, you know, other needs like neurodiverse needs and things.
Yeah. So how did you narrow it down to 5 days? What made you think 5 days? Because that's what you're asking for, you know, to authorise all schools to authorise up to 5 days. But I think you've said per academic term or per academic year. What have you put?
So it kind of was just a bit of a random number really, because I was actually my little boy has struggled in his nursery. He really struggled. He was in a previous nursery setting that was just horrendous, really didn't meet his needs. So we moved him to another nursery and they've been incredible. He has come on so much. But there was times when I would have to take days off because he wasn't able to go into nursery because he would just, you know, be too dysregulated. And, you know, school said, okay, well, you get 5 days a year for, you know, care and needs and for needs of your children, things like that. So it was just a kind of, okay, well, if I can have that to look after my child, if I, you know, I mean, he needed more than 5 days, and obviously there will be a lot of children who do need more than 5 days, you know, but it was just that kind of, okay, well, if I can be entitled to 5 days to look after him, then why aren't, you know, children given that, you know, at least 5 days to kind of look after themselves when they need to, really. So it was just that kind of, it was just that, you know, well, if you're entitled to 5 days for your children's, to look after your children's needs, and they should be entitled to that themselves.
Yeah, okay. So from my perspective, that's an interesting one, and I'll tell you why. Because when I have young people who have extensive anxiety and they're trying their hardest to stay in mainstream, the recommendations that I strongly assert are to have a Wednesday off. And the reason being is, and I would only do this with autism and ADHD, because they are in conflict, you need respite from the environment to be able to do your work. So I'm not saying that the young person takes the Wednesday off and just does nothing. It's more about take them out of the environment so they don't have to fight with all of that in order to do some learning. And some schools are generally, they seem okay with that. And then the other thing about ADHD is a lot of young people with ADHD really struggle to get up super early, and they kind of need that gentle
slow start, isn't it? Yeah.
Around and then get to school. And although that can be very irritating and annoying, and you know, you could argue, well, you're just encouraging this person to be like this for the rest of their life. My argument back to that is, welcome to the ADHD presentation. If that's how their body clock operates, I'm afraid that's what they're going to do, because once they're an adult, they'll choose whether they want to work a late shift or a night shift.
But at least they get that choice, don't they? They've got that choice. They're able to make that choice themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. So from my perspective, I'm thinking if you have autism and ADHD, you're going to lose 5 days straight off if the school will only give them 5 days. Whereas actually, I would love schools to be really keen to tuning into every child's mental health, to kind of go, what's the need here? And if it is autism and ADHD and they're really struggling, the Wednesday shouldn't be penalised. It should be, yes, they're still working, but they're in a different workplace. And you know, I know we can do it, because for a lot of people, COVID was an absolute blessed sanctuary, because it allowed us to think differently, where we can work from home. And those, you know, managers who like to see their person working flat out, they were the ones who probably had poor mental health, because they couldn't see what their employees were getting up to at home. But again, if you're at home and you have ADHD, you have to move to process. So if you're thinking about a solution whilst you're emptying the dishwasher, making a coffee, because of that movement of physically getting up, you've normally come back with the answer by the time you sit down at the computer.
Yeah.
In the same way that a young person with ADHD has the most phenomenal ability to be able to watch something on YouTube, listen to something on another technology device, as well as humming away and doing their homework. And you just think, turn that noise off, do that, and they're just going to suddenly grind to a halt, because that ADHD needs that movement. It needs all that sensory to kind of impact and
be an
active generator. So I guess what I'm really relaying to you is schools really need a lot more education and a lot more understanding. And again, lots and lots of people who saw us at the autism and ADHD show recently were saying, but there's nowhere out there who gives that level of training. And it's like, well, there is, because we've designed our own CPD modules to do exactly that, not just look at autism, but also look at autism and anxiety, because the two are straddled together. They aren't meant to be together, but because of life and the way we do things, it's not user friendly for autistic people.
No.
So we naturally have anxiety, and that's why anxiety is such a big barrier, because schools will not address. And you've also said about the academies are getting bigger, more branding, it's more a business, but in that very moment of becoming a big branded academy business, that's boding not so well for those who are neurodiverse, because of course you don't want bigger, you want smaller.
Yeah. It is. And I think sometimes you see some of the academies and they look quite military, like, you know, you see them and you think, wow, that's, you know, that's strange. You know, and for some children, you know, that does work, that, you know, the very, very strict boundaries, the very, very, you know, these are the rules, this, you know, for some autistic children, that's great, because it's like, you know, I like my rules, I like my boundaries, I like to know. But for then children with ADHD, it's like, well, no, you know, that's, why are you telling me how I can have my hair? Why are you telling me what shoes I can wear? And, you know, and it's that kind of thing, isn't it? You know, and you find a lot of the time that they're so focused on how they look as a school, that, you know, because you see all the children that, you know, go on like campaigns, and all the children are smiling, and you know, they look so happy to be there, and you think, oh yeah, but what about those other ones that are, you know, are in the corner who are not happy to be there? You know, why aren't we kind of focusing on them and on how we can support them, instead of being like, look how happy all our children to be in school. And you know, I remember, you know, people would say to me, you know, school day is the best days of your life. I thought, oh my God, it's like, no, they are not.
No,
you know, I would not
wait till they're to release.
Like, it was just like, you know, school day is the best days of your life, and for you know, for some people they are, you know, for some people who just sail through, they really, really are, you know. And like that was like that for my husband. You know, my husband, he was, you know, football, he was clever, he was popular, he loved school. I thought it was the worst thing for me. It was the worst experience of my life being in school, because
Yeah.
all I could think of was just get me out, just get
Yeah.
me out of here, you know. And I wasn't interested in anything. I wasn't, you know, there was nothing that, you know, took my engagement. There was nothing that I particularly cared about. And, you know, I think a lot of like children, you know, young people, just people in general with ADHD, if they're not interested in a topic, you've got no chance of engaging them, really, have you? You know, so
No.
it is that
No.
kind of, you know, trying to engage them and things like that, and, you know, trying to stop saying, you know, oh, school day is the best day of your life, because actually for a lot of young people, they're really, really not, you know.
No.
But it, you know, and that's okay. You know, school isn't for everyone, but we've got to try and, you know, the law is that school has to be for everybody. But then what we need to try and change is, okay, it has to be for everybody, but how can we make it more accessible to those who need that extra support?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, we're hearing rumours that they're clamping down on home educators who must be spiralling with concerns about, you know, I've been trying so hard to protect my child's mental health and well-being, and now there's the potential that we are going to be over scrutinised and enforcing our children back into schools. But again, that's another topic that I'm sure we'll do another day. But yes, so okay, let's bring this round then. So how do people access to sign this petition if they want to? I think there'll be
So I'm actually in the process of creating like a website and things. So you know, want to create a website. I've obviously, you know, I'm trying to send it out to everybody and things like that. I'm going to set up like an Instagram page and things like that. So it is just it is very, very new. It is, you know, I only literally started it this week. So it's very, very, very new. So I am still in the process of you know, getting it all sorted and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I have got like a personal Instagram with the link on it and things, but I am going to set up another Instagram for it and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, you know, I'm going to local you know, wellbeing groups next week, and just trying to get that word across and things, you know.
Yeah. So
So it is.
we can put the link as well on our Facebook community group.
Yeah,
And
fantastic. Yeah.
like I said earlier, we can put it on our YouTube channel as well. And we'll definitely try and get it on WordPress or Patreon. But it's just, you know, is there a deadline to this? You know, how does it work? Do you have to have so many numbers before you can present it?
Not as far as I know. I don't. I'm not aware of that. You know, I've just kind of, you know, done it to kind of, you know, let's see where this goes type thing, and let's see how many people are actually behind this, and how many people actually think this is a good idea. You know, as I say, I think I only started it on like Monday. So I'm still very kind of much trying to, like, you know, make it more of a thing so more people can access it and things like that. But no, there's no deadline or anything like that. It's just kind of everybody who supports it, just sign and you know, share it with people who you think it would matter to.
Yeah. Okay, I will. So thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
joining
much.
me. No, it's been great. And of course, we've been both quite animated with information, haven't we? So around it. But I think it's just an amazing thing that you're doing. So obviously we're very keen to support you with this, because it is needed. There is so much inequality between staff and young people. It's quite frightening when you think about mental health could be the rest of a young person's life, when in actual fact that shouldn't be the case. We should be able to show a duty of care and support young people's mental health. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. So we'll say goodbye. My thanks indeed again to Catherine, who's joined me. We will be putting a link below that will allow you to signpost to where she's putting this petition, and you can hopefully sign up as quickly as possible. If there are any difficulties, you can come back to myself and I will field them over to you, Catherine, so that you can direct them more so. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your time today.